All right, so we're sitting here with Lieutenant General Jeffrey Buchanan. You're wrapping up your mission in Puerto Rico. We've spoken before, so thank you for the opportunity. I have a couple of questions for you. I guess the first one is the one that everybody's been asking. Why do you think the crisis is over? Because there are still thousands without water, without power, and there's still some communities that are cut off.
There are no communities that are cut off. Every single town can be accessed by the ground. When we first got here, there were many, many communities cut off, and we had to deliver supplies by air to many, many places. But, we've got confirmation through FEMA, through every mayor I've talked to, they can actually drive to every single part of their communities. That was important for us because, and some of them are inconvenient to get there, because if there's a bridge down, instead of just going across a bridge, they have to drive around sometimes. And it can be inconvenient, but it's an important factor for us because, one of our major tasks early on was to clear those routes with down trees and down power lines and those kinds of things. And so until we got the routes cleared, we had to fly a lot to deliver food and water. Now, food and water is getting to every single municipality on the ground.
Okay. So what about the visuals that we get, from, different media outlets with major bridges still out? And the question...
major bridges are, there are a number of bridges out. There are roads that are washed out. But I wouldn't say that, there are clearly communities that still need help. And they're going to need help for a long time until we get those roads rebuilt, until we get those bridges rebuilt. That's going to take some time. But what the military does, what we do is we do emergency response.
Okay.
And so if you think about the kinds of things that we were brought here to do, to do search and rescue operations, to open the seaports and the airports, to clear the routes, and then to work on set up a system and get it going for commodity distribution by ground and air. And eventually, now all of that has transitioned to ground, providing medical support. Yes, we're still providing some medical support, but we're out of the emergency. 66 of 67 hospitals are back up and running. And so, this is, I would not say we're trending towards normalcy. As long as we've got so much electricity down across the island, it's not normal, but it's stabilized.
Okay. And then what would you, say to people who wonder why maybe the Army isn't working on setting up temporary bridges or working on some sort of solution to help these people who are...
Yeah, so in many cases, where we could, we cut new bypasses to bridges and establish some what we call high water crosses, places where people can drive across a creek or something. But if it's a deep river, no, we're not gonna do that. And so why not? Well, first of all, we're very expensive.
Okay.
It's expensive to use military forces here. Now, the reason you want to use this is because we can bring a lot of people, and we have some excellent equipment, and you can bring us to an emergency situation to help stabilize things. But we're not a good choice for the long term because we're far more expensive than if we employed local contractors to do that.
Okay.
And it's far more important for the local economy and the actual recovery if our country invests that money in local contractors to rebuild the bridges instead of using military manpower.
And is that happening?
It is.
It is. Is it through the Corps of Engineers?
Partially. The Corps of Engineers is involved because they work directly for FEMA. And so it's in what we call Emergency Support Function number 3, Civil Works. The Corps of Engineers has the responsibility under FEMA to do that, but it's really guided by the Department of Transportation across the Commonwealth.
Okay.
And the Corps, it's not a bunch of military engineers out there conducting these rebuilds, but what we do is we use their contracting mechanism to contract local companies to do that.
Okay.
And so I've been told they've rebuilt 5 bridges so far. They're continuing to work through them. The priority of which bridges get rebuilt is really determined by the Commonwealth. So the Commonwealth says, okay, given what our priority is and the need to get trafficability to a certain area, this is the first place to work.
Now, let me ask you something. When we spoke about 6 or 7 weeks ago when you first got here, you said that this had been the worst natural disaster that you had seen. What lessons are you taking back with you? I mean, what advice would you give to FEMA and Corps of Engineers, which are staying here, and even the National Guard? You know, now that you're pulling out.
Right. I think there's a number of great lessons that I've taken away personally. So for me, one of the key one is for me coming in is to try to understand the situation and define the problem. We're very good at solving problems, but if we don't really understand what the problem is, we're going to be off to the races solving the wrong problem.
Okay.
And
what was the problem here?
So I'll give you the core problem. We have a process that we use, you know, it's called the National Response Framework that describes how do we respond to emergencies from the local level to the state level to the federal level, and how do we work together as a team to do that. That process worked pretty well in Texas for Hurricane Harvey. It worked pretty well in Florida for Hurricane Irma. But when I got here, my analysis of the situation led me to believe that Puerto Rico was completely overwhelmed. And it was overwhelmed for three reasons. So that's what I think the core problem was. And there is a so what to it. So I think it was overwhelmed for three reasons. First of all, aging and vulnerable infrastructure. The infrastructure itself, whether it was the electrical lines, the water system, whatever, was old. It was not, I wouldn't say it was unsatisfactory, but it was old and it was vulnerable. That's number one. Number two, there was a lack of capacity here. So it
from
was,
whom?
well, from the state level in particular, whether it's the Emergency Management Agency, the amount of guardsmen that were here, but that lack of capacity was increased because Puerto Rico's an island, and so you can't surge into add to the state capacity by driving down Highway 95 or driving down Highway 35. You know, so Puerto Rico didn't have a great amount of capacity, and it was isolated. That's the second factor. And then the third factor is you had two Category 5 storms separated by about 10 days, and the magnitude of the disaster was completely overwhelming. So when you add all three of those, so Puerto Rico was overwhelmed. So what? Well, for us, what that meant is we needed to be far more involved in planning and execution and commit far more resources at the federal level than we typically do.
Okay.
So instead of waiting to figure out what the gaps were from the state level, which is how the system is designed, we wait until we get requests and then we just try to fill in the gaps. We had to be far more heavier-handed in developing like the concept of logistics, and just start bringing in a lot of federal capability. So I think that's a key lesson for us. The key thing is, okay, before you head into the direction to start solving problems, you better figure out what the real problem is you're trying to solve.
Now let me ask you something. Are you leaving instructions, or are you leaving advice to the men and women that stay here after you go back to Texas?
Sure, and I'll remain the Joint Force Land Component Commander. So there's going to be an element here that continues to work for me and continues to support FEMA, and they're responsible for me, and I will still give direction. It just doesn't require my day-to-day supervision like we have. And so for some time, my deputy, Major General Brian Harris, will be here supervising our operations. And at the tactical level, General Reyes, who's been here all along, will continue that process. At some point in time in the future, and General Reyes continues to report to me on the federal side. He reports to the Adjutant General on the state side and reports to me on the federal side. At some point in time, you know, the Adjutant General, myself, and General Reyes will make a recommendation that we're ready to disestablish the dual status command.
Okay.
And at that point in time, then, you know, the remaining forces will all be state forces reporting up the state chain. So I'm going to continue to give, you know, instructions and supervise operations. It just doesn't require my day-to-day detailed supervision.
Are you satisfied with what's happened so far?
So I think it's a strange question to ask. I think there are many people throughout the Commonwealth that that are in a much better place than they were when we first came here. And so I'm satisfied that we helped a lot of people. I'm satisfied that we saved lives. I'm satisfied that we worked together with the Commonwealth and with FEMA on a great team effort to make a difference. But, you know, this is not, things are not back to normal. And that's going to take, that's probably going to take years if you think about it. I mean, if your home was completely destroyed, when are you going to be satisfied?
Right.
When your home is rebuilt.
Yeah.
So when is that going to be? Well, it's not going to be this month or next month. It's going to take some time. And until all of those homes are rebuilt, the people who own those homes shouldn't be satisfied. So when they're all completely satisfied, then I'll be completely satisfied, because then we'll be done.
Yes.
But there's a difference between the emergency response and the long-term recovery. So I'm satisfied with our effort and the difference we made in the emergency response, but we've got a long ways to go.
Right. And so now it's in the hands of mostly FEMA and the Corps of Engineers
And the
National
Commonwealth
Guard.
and all of those contractors that are going to be doing the real work, you know, helping people get back on their feet.
Okay. Thank you, General. Appreciate the opportunity.
Gracias.
you.
It's been my honor to serve here. I've really grown to be inspired by and admire the people of Puerto Rico. I can't wait to come back.
Thank you. Appreciate
Gracias.
it.